They called them the perfect couple. Harrison Sterling, the billionaire king of Wall Street, and Isabella, the quiet beauty, on his arm. On the night of the Diamond Gala, Harrison thought he was untouchable. He had the money, the mistress, and the world at his feet. But he didn't know that Isabella had been watching. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just vanished. And when the sun rose over New York City the next morning, Harrison Sterling woke up to a nightmare that would leave the entire world in shock. This is the story of how one woman's songs destroyed an empire. The flashes of the paparazzi cameras were blinding, a relentless stroboscope of white light against the humid New York evening. To the rest of the world, the entrance to the Pierre Hotel on Fifth Avenue was a gateway to heaven, a parade of silk diamonds and power. To Isabella Sterling, it felt more like the intake processing of a high-security prison. She adjusted the strap of her emerald silk gown, her fingers brushing against the cool metal of the wedding band she had worn for 7 years. Beside her, Harrison Sterling was beaming. He possessed the kind of aggressive, shark-like handsomeness that made people nervous and eager to please all at once. His tuxedo was bespoke cut by Anderson and Shepherd, and he wore it with the arrogance of a man who knew he could buy the hotel they were walking into. "Smile, Bella," Harrison hissed through his teeth. His lips stretched into a media-ready grin. He waved at a photographer from the New York Times. "You look like you're attending a funeral. Try to look like the wife of a man whose stock just tripled." Isabella forced the corners of her mouth up. "I'm just tired, Harrison. The prep for tonight took all day." "Well, wake up," he muttered, his hand tightening painfully on her lower back, just out of sight of the cameras. "Jessica is inside. I need you to be civil. Don't embarrass me like you did at the Hampton fundraiser." Isabella's stomach churned at the name. Jessica Vane. Harrison's head of public relations, and the woman who had been wearing Isabella's favorite diamond earrings in a breathless Instagram story just 2 days ago. Harrison thought he was subtle. He thought Isabella was simply the dull, dutiful wife, a former librarian he'd plucked from obscurity, a pretty ornament that had lost its shine. He didn't know about the burner phone taped beneath the vanity in the guest bathroom. He didn't know about the meetings with the forensic accountant in a diner in New Jersey, or the private investigator Mr. O'Malley, who had documented every hotel room, every dinner receipt, and every text message Harrison had sent to Jessica for the last 18 months. "I'll be on my best behavior," Isabella said softly. Her voice was steady, betraying nothing of the icy resolve settling in her chest. They ascended the stairs, the red carpet swallowing their footsteps. Inside the ballroom was a kaleidoscope of excess. Chandeliers the size of small cars dripped crystals from the ceiling. The air smelled of expensive perfume, truffle oil, and old money. Harrison immediately dropped her arm as soon as they cleared the press line. "Get a drink. Mingle with the wives. I need to talk to Senator Reynolds about the merger." He didn't wait for a response. He smoothed his lapels and strode toward the bar where a blonde woman in a daring red dress Jessica was already holding court, laughing loudly with a glass of champagne in her hand. Harrison didn't go to her directly, but the look they exchanged was electric, a shared secret in a room full of people. Isabella stood alone near a pillar watching them. A waiter passed by with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. She declined. She needed a clear head. "He's doing it again," a voice drawled beside her. Isabella turned to see Julian Thorne, Harrison's CFO, and perhaps the only man in the company who actually understood how the algorithms worked. Julian was older graying with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He had always been kind to Isabella, in a distant, pitying way. "Hello, Julian," she said. "He's playing a dangerous game," Julian murmured, looking at Harrison. "The board is getting nervous about his expenditures. The rumors about the offshore accounts are getting louder." Isabella took a sip of sparkling water. "Harrison always lands on his feet, doesn't he? He's the genius." Julian chuckled darkly. "He's the face, Isabella. You and I both know who did the coding for the original Project Chimera interface back in the garage days." Isabella stiffened. "That was a long time ago. I was just helping out." "You wrote the kernel," Julian said, giving her a sharp look. "I still see your syntax in the updates. It's a shame you signed those rights away in the prenup." Isabella looked at Harrison, who was now leaning in close to Jessica, whispering something that made her giggle and touch his chest. "Yes," Isabella said, her eyes cold. "It is a shame." She checked the Cartier watch on her wrist. 8:15 p.m. The timeline was tight. The private jet Harrison kept on standby at Teterboro Airport was scheduled for maintenance at midnight, but she had overridden the schedule using the admin codes Harrison thought she'd forgotten years ago. "Enjoy the evening, Julian," Isabella said, placing her glass on a passing tray. "I think I'm going to powder my nose." "Are you all right?" Julian asked, sensing a shift in her demeanor. "I'm better than I've been in years," she replied. As she walked away, she didn't look back at her husband. She didn't look at the woman trying to steal her life. She looked only at the exit signs glowing green in the distance. The ladies' room at the Pierre was more opulent than most people's apartments. Marble floors, gold leaf mirrors, and an attendant who handed out warm towels. Isabella entered a stall and locked the door. She didn't use the toilet. Instead, she reached into her clutch and pulled out a small encrypted USB drive. She sat on the closed lid of the toilet and closed her eyes for a second, breathing in the scent of lavender potpourri. She remembered the day she met Harrison. He had been charming, then desperate for her help with his thesis. She had loved him so deeply, it physically hurt. She had built his code, organized his life, and smoothed over his rough edges until he shone like a diamond. And in return, he had isolated her. He had convinced her she was socially awkward, that she needed him to navigate the world. He had taken credit for her work, claiming she wouldn't understand the business side. Then came the emotional abuse, the comments about her weight, her clothes, her quietness. And finally, Jessica. Jessica, who was 23, loud and vicious. Jessica, who had sent Isabella a text message from a blocked number 3 months ago. "He's leaving you after the IPO launches. He says you're dead weight. Save yourself the embarrassment and file first." That text had been a mistake. It was the spark that ignited the gasoline Isabella had been standing in for years. Isabella opened her eyes. She took the wedding ring off her finger. It was a 5-carat solitaire worth more than her parents' house. She placed it on the top of the toilet paper dispenser. Next, she took out her phone, the one Harrison paid for, the one with the tracking software he had installed for her safety. She navigated to the settings and disabled the GPS, then performed a factory reset. She dropped the phone into her purse. She wouldn't leave it here. That was too cliché. She would dump it in a trash can in the subway. She exited the stall. The attendant smiled at her. "Everything all right, Mrs. Sterling?" "Perfect," Isabella said. "Actually, could you do me a favor? If my husband asks, tell him I went to the terrace to get some fresh air. I have a bit of a headache." "Of course, ma'am." Isabella handed the woman a $100 bill. "Thank you." She didn't go to the terrace. She walked out of the restroom, took a sharp left down the service corridor she had mapped out weeks ago, and exited through the kitchen. The heat of the ovens and the shouting of the chefs was a stark contrast to the cool ballroom. No one noticed the woman in the green dress slipping out the delivery bay door. The night air in the alleyway was heavy and smelled of wet pavement. A black sedan was waiting at the curb, engine idling. It wasn't a limo. It was a nondescript Toyota Camry. The window rolled down. A woman with short, spiky grey hair looked out. This was Diane, the paralegal, from the firm Isabella had hired secretly. "You got the package?" Diane asked. Isabella patted her clutch where the USB drive lay. "It's all here. The ledger, the emails, and the access keys to the Cayman accounts." "Get in," Diane said. "We have 40 minutes before the shift change at the airfield." As the car pulled away, merging into the yellow stream of taxis on 61st Street, Isabella allowed herself one look back at the hotel. Inside that ballroom, the gala was in full swing. At 9:00 p.m., Harrison was scheduled to give a speech announcing the launch of Titanium, the new AI interface that was going to revolutionize the tech world. He didn't know that Titanium didn't exist without the decryption key Isabella currently held in her purse. He didn't know that at 9:15 p.m., a scheduled email would be sent to the SEC, the IRS, and the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal. Back inside the ballroom, Harrison checked his watch. 8:45 p.m. "Where the hell is she?" he muttered. He drained his scotch and slammed the glass down on the bar. Jessica slid up beside him, running a hand down his arm. "Who cares? You look tense, Harry. You need to relax before your speech." "It's about image, Jess," he snapped, though he didn't pull away. "The happy couple needs to be on stage when the confetti falls. If she's sulking in the bathroom, I'm going to drag her out." "Let her sulk," Jessica purred. "After tonight, you won't need her anymore. Once the stock jumps, you can buy her out, and we can finally go public." Harrison smirked, the arrogance returning. "You're right. She's probably crying in a stall somewhere. God, she's pathetic." He signaled to his head of security, a burly man named Kyle. "Go find my wife. Check the restrooms, the terrace. Tell her she has 5 minutes to get her ass back to the table, or she's walking home." Kyle nodded and moved off through the crowd. Harrison straightened his tie. He felt like a god. The room was filled with people who wanted to be him. He had billions in assets, a company poised to dominate the globe, and a beautiful mistress waiting in the wings. He walked toward the stage, shaking hands with Senator Reynolds and the CEO of Chase Bank. The lights dimmed. The spotlight hit the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed. "Please welcome the visionary behind Titan Corp, Mr. Harrison Sterling." Applause thundered. Harrison jogged up the steps, waving. He gripped the podium. "Thank you," he shouted. "Tonight is a night for history." As he began his speech, Kyle, the security guard, was standing in the ladies' room, looking at the empty stall. He saw the diamond ring sitting on the toilet paper dispenser. It caught the light sparkling mockingly. Kyle picked it up. He frowned. He keyed his radio earpiece. "Boss," Kyle whispered, trying not to be heard over the applause echoing from the ballroom. "We have a problem. She's not here, but she left her ring." On stage, Harrison didn't hear the earpiece. He was in the middle of a crescendo. And that is why titanium is the future. He reached into his pocket for the remote to trigger the demo on the massive screen behind him. He pressed the button. Usually the screen would display the sleek rotating logo of the new software. Instead, the massive screen behind him flickered. It went black for a second. The audience murmured. Harrison laughed nervously. "A little technical glitch, folks. Live TV, right?" He pressed the button again. The screen flared to life. But it wasn't the logo. It was a spreadsheet. A massive, complex Excel spreadsheet with Rose highlighted in red. The font was large enough for the front row to read. The headers were clear. Bribes, Senator Reynolds, Offshore Shell Company. Alpha, Jessica Vane. Apartment Purchase Company. Funds. The room went deathly silent. Harrison turned around, his smile freezing on his face. He squinted at the screen. It took him 3 seconds to realize what he was looking at. "Cut the feed," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Cut the damn feed!" But the screen changed again. This time it was a video. It was shaky, clearly taken from a hidden camera. It showed Harrison and Jessica in his office. Harrison on screen. "The SEC is too stupid to check the Singapore accounts. By the time they figure it out, I'll have dumped the toxic assets on Isabella's charitable foundation. She'll take the fall and we'll be drinking margaritas in Bali." Jessica on screen. "You're so bad, Harry. I love it." A collective gasp ripped through the ballroom. Senator Reynolds, who was sitting in the front row, turned a shade of purple that matched the velvet curtains. Jessica, standing by the bar, dropped her glass. It shattered, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Harrison stood on stage, small and trembling in the spotlight. He looked out at the sea of faces. Faces that had been adoring him 10 seconds ago, and were now looking at him with a mixture of horror and predatory glee. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Then it buzzed again, and again. A continuous vibration. He pulled it out numbly. It was a text notification from his bank. "Alert. Suspicious activity. Your accounts have been frozen, pursuant to a federal warrant." He looked up. The doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. But it wasn't Isabella returning. It was the FBI. The minutes following the FBI's entrance were a blur of chaotic noise and motion, a surreal dissonance against the backdrop of Mozart, still playing faintly over the ballroom speakers. Harrison Sterling was not a man accustomed to losing control. In his world, problems were solved with a phone call, a check, or a threat. As 2 agents in windbreakers, emblazoned with FBI, ascended the stairs to the stage, Harrison's first instinct was not fear, but indignation. He actually held up a hand, palm out, as if stopping a waiter who had brought the wrong order. "Excuse me," Harrison barked, his voice amplified by the microphone he was still gripping. "This is a private event. You have no jurisdiction to interrupt. Harrison Sterling, you are under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement," the lead agent, a tall woman with eyes like flint, announced. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. The silence in the room was absolute. "This is ridiculous," Harrison spat, pulling his arm away as the agent reached for him. "Do you have any idea who I am? I am the CEO of Titan Corp. I have dinner with the Attorney General. If you touch me, I will have your badge and your pension by morning. Turn around and place your hands behind your back," the agent said, unblivered. Flashbulbs erupted like a supernova. The photographers who had been ushered to the back earlier were now surging forward, fighting security to get the money shot. The billionaire king being cuffed on his own throne. Harrison looked into the crowd, searching for an ally. He locked eyes with Senator Reynolds. The senator, a man Harrison had vacationed with in Aspen 2 months prior, was already on his phone, furiously whispering to an aide while briskly walking toward the emergency exit. He didn't even look up. Harrison scanned the room for Julian Thorne. The CFO was standing by a pillar, sipping his drink, watching the scene with the detached interest of a man watching a play he had already read the script for. He raised his glass slightly in Harrison's direction, a toast or perhaps a goodbye. "Jessica!" Harrison yelled, desperation finally cracking his voice. He looked toward the bar. Jessica Vane was there, but she wasn't rushing to his defense. She was frantically trying to shove her phone into her clutch, her face pale. As Harrison watched, 2 uniformed officers approached her. She began to shake her head, pointing at the stage, mouthing the words, "I just work for him." I didn't know anything. The betrayal hit Harrison harder than the cold metal of the handcuffs clicking around his wrists. "Let's go," the agent said, shoving him forward. As he was frog-marched down the stairs, passing the very people who had worshipped him an hour ago, Harrison heard the whispers. They weren't sympathetic. "I knew it was a Ponzi scheme. Did you see the spreadsheet? He was funneling money to the mistress. Isabella. Where is Isabella?" That name pierced through the fog of his rage. Isabella. She hadn't just left. She had timed this. She had orchestrated this. The spreadsheet on the screen, the video, it was her. The quiet, mousy woman who organized his socks and proofread his emails had just executed him on live television. As they pushed him through the revolving doors and into the cool night air, the red and blue lights of the police cruisers strobed against the facade of the Pierre Hotel. A massive crowd had already gathered outside, onlookers, tourists, and more press. Harrison was shoved into the back of an unmarked SUV. The door slammed, sealing him in a cage of reinforced glass and leather. Miles away, the silence was different. It was the hum of tires on asphalt and the rhythmic thrum-thrum of a car passing over bridge expansion joints. Isabella sat in the passenger seat of the Toyota Camry, watching the city skyline recede in the side mirror. Diane was driving her hands steady on the wheel at 10 and 2. "You did it," Diane said quietly. "It's everywhere. Twitter is melting down. #Sterling scandal is trending worldwide. Even higher than the Met Gala." Isabella didn't smile. She felt a profound exhaustion settling into her bones, a physical weight lifting off her chest that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying for a decade. "Is he in custody?" Isabella asked. Diane tapped the screen of her phone mounted on the dashboard. A live news feed from CNN was playing. The headline, "Billionaire arrested at Gala wife missing." "They have him," Diane confirmed. "And Jessica has been detained for questioning regarding the shell companies listed in her name. She's going to flip on him before they even get her fingerprints. That girl has no loyalty." Isabella turned her head to look out the window. They were crossing the George Washington Bridge, leaving Manhattan behind. The lights of the city looked beautiful from here, distant, glittering, harmless. "I don't want to watch it," Isabella said. "Turn it off." Diane swiped the screen, dark. "Where to? We have the safe house in Vermont prepped, or we can head straight to the airfield in Jersey if you want to push for the international flight tonight." "Vermont," Isabella said. "I need to sleep for a week before I get on a plane. And Diane, yeah, pull over at the next diner. I want a cheeseburger, a greasy one, and a milkshake." Diane chuckled a dry, raspy sound. "You got it, boss." 20 minutes later, Isabella Sterling, formerly the ensu of New York society, was sitting in a red vinyl booth at a roadside diner off I-95. She was wearing a grey hoodie Diane had brought for her pulled over her gala gown. She ate the burger with her hands, grease dripping onto the paper placemat. It tasted like freedom. Inside the diner, a small TV mounted in the corner was broadcasting the news. The anchor was breathless. "Sources say the leak came from inside the Sterling household. Documents released to the public domain tonight show a level of corruption that rivals Enron. But the question on everyone's mind is, where is Isabella Sterling? Police have declared the penthouse a crime scene, but the First Lady of Wall Street is nowhere to be found." Isabella dipped a fry in ketchup. She watched her own photo flash on the screen, a picture from last year's charity ball, where she looked pale and thin, standing in Harrison's shadow. "She looks sad," the waitress said, pouring coffee into Isabella's mug, not recognizing the woman in the hoodie. "Poor thing. Probably didn't know a thing about what her husband was doing." Isabella blew on her coffee. "No," she said softly. "She probably knew everything." The interrogation room at the Federal Detention Center in Lower Manhattan was designed to make you feel small. Cinder-block walls painted a depressing shade of institutional cream, a metal table bolted to the floor, and a two-way mirror that hummed with fluorescent light. Harrison Sterling had been sitting there for 3 hours. They had taken his tuxedo jacket, his tie, and his shoelaces. He looked like a disheveled waiter after a double shift. The door buzzed and opened. A man in a pristine charcoal suit walked in. He carried a leather briefcase that cost more than the interrogation table. This was Arthur Pendleton, the most expensive defense attorney in the city, known as the Shredder. Harrison slumped in relief. "Arthur, thank God. Get me out of here. The bail hearing is in an hour, right? I want to sue the DOJ for false arrest. I want to sue the hotel. I want—" "Harrison, shut up," Arthur said. His voice was devoid of its usual silky charm. It was flat and hard. Harrison blinked. "Excuse me." Arthur sat down, placing the briefcase on the table. He didn't open it. He just stared at his client. "I've just come from a meeting with the U.S. Attorney, and I've seen the evidence dump." "It's fabricated," Harrison insisted, leaning forward. "Isabella. She's hysterical. She doctored those files. She's jealous because I was going to leave her." "Harrison." Arthur sighed, rubbing his temples. "They have the bank routing numbers. They have the audio recordings of you authorizing the transfers. They have the IP logs from your private server. But that's not the worst part. What could be worse than this? The SEC didn't just get a spreadsheet," Arthur said. "They got the decryption keys to the black box accounts, the ones you told me didn't exist, the ones holding the cartel money." Harrison's face went the color of ash. She couldn't know about those. I never wrote those down. Apparently she installed a keylogger on your laptop 3 years ago," Arthur said, delivering the news with brutal efficiency. "Every keystroke, every password, every deleted email. She has it all. And now the FBI has it all." Harrison put his head in his hands. The reality was finally crashing down. The walls of the room felt like they were closing in. "Where is she? Is she in custody? If I can talk to her. She's gone, Harrison. Gone where the Hamptons." Arthur laughed, a short barking sound. "No. I mean, gone. The FBI raided your penthouse an hour ago." "Do you know what they found? My art collection. They found nothing. Not just she wasn't there. They found no trace of her personal life. Her clothes are there, sure. The expensive ones you bought her. But her toothbrush gone. Her passport gone. The family photos she kept in the bedside drawer gone. The hard drives from the home security system were wiped and physically drilled through." Arthur leaned in. "The feds think she's been planning this exit for at least a year. She didn't just run away, Harrison. She evaporated, and she took the liquidity with her." "What liquidity?" Harrison whispered. "The Cayman accounts," Arthur said. "The ones you were going to use to flee if this day ever came. They were emptied at 9:02 p.m. last night. $400 million. Transferred through a dozen shell companies in Malta and Estonia before disappearing into crypto wallets that are untraceable." Harrison stared at the table. She stole my money. Technically, Arthur corrected, since there was no prenup regarding those specific offshore accounts which legally don't exist. And since she had the access codes you shared with her, it's a grey area. But that's not your biggest problem. Arthur opened his briefcase and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. This is a communication from the Board of Directors of Titan Corp. They convened an emergency meeting at midnight. Harrison snatched the paper. Termination of cause. Removal of CEO title, effective immediately. They can't do this, Harrison snarled. I built that company. I own 51% of the voting shares. The government froze those shares this morning, Arthur said. But here is the kicker. You know the titanium launch, the AI that was supposed to save the company. Yes, it's worth billions. Once I explain, it doesn't work, Harrison. Harrison froze. What? The engineers tried to boot the core system this morning to do damage control. They can't access the neural net. It's locked. Harrison's eyes widened. He remembered what Julian had said years ago. She wrote the colonel. Isabella. Harrison breathed. The system is asking for a biometric key, Arthur explained. Specifically, a retinal scan and a voice phrase from Isabella Sterling. Without her, titanium is just $1 billion of useless server racks. The stock price has dropped 70% since the market opened. You're not a billionaire anymore, Harrison. Depending on how the clawbacks go, you might be indigent. Harrison felt bile rise in his throat. He stood up and kicked the chair back. It clattered against the wall. Find her! He screamed at the two-way mirror, knowing the agents were watching. Find that witch. She ruined me. Arthur stood up, buttoning his jacket. He looked at Harrison with something bordering on disgust. I can represent you for the arraignment, Harrison, but my retainer is $500,000, and since your accounts are frozen, I'll need that in cash from a third party. Do you have any friends left who will lend you $500,000? Harrison opened his mouth, but no name came out. Senator Reynolds gone. Jessica arrested. Julian. I didn't think so, Arthur said. I'll have the court appoint a public defender. Good luck, Harrison. Arthur Pendleton walked out, the heavy steel door clanking shut behind him. Harrison Sterling was alone. For the first time in his life, the silence wasn't deferential. It was absolute. Meanwhile, 300 miles north, the morning sun was breaking over the green mountains of Vermont. The safe house was actually a renovated farmhouse on 40 acres of dense woodland. It was purchased 3 years ago by an LLC called Blue Heron, which was owned by a trust in New Zealand, which was managed by a firm in Singapore. Isabella stood on the front porch, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. The air was crisp and smelled of pine needles. She held a burner phone to her ear. It's done, a male voice said on the other end. This was Mr. O'Malley, the private investigator. Diane tells me you're safe. I am, Isabella said. Did you send the package to the district attorney? Courier dropped it off 10 minutes ago. It contains the locations of the buried hard drives Harrison hid in the Hamptons house. The ones with the blackmail material on the senator. Good, Isabella said. That ensures Reynolds can't pull strings to get him out. You know they will come looking for you, Isabella. Not just the FBI. The cartel investors whose money you took. Isabella took a sip of tea. She watched a hawk circling high above the tree line. The money isn't with me, O'Malley. You know that. It was donated. All of it. Every cent. O'Malley sounded skeptical. 400 million? I kept enough for the house and a quiet life, Isabella said. The rest went to the charities Harrison used to launder it, specifically the funds for women's shelters and legal aid for victims of domestic abuse. I thought it was poetic justice. You're a dangerous woman, Mrs. Sterling. Ms. Sterling, she corrected. Or, well, I suppose I need a new name now. I have the documents ready, O'Malley said. Passport, license, birth certificate. You can be anyone you want. Where will you go? Europe, Asia. Isabella looked at the dense forest surrounding her. She thought about the noise of the gala, the flashes of the cameras, the suffocating weight of Harrison's hand on her back. I think I'll stay here for a while, she said. I have a lot of reading to catch up on. And O'Malley. Yes, make sure Jessica gets a good lawyer. Use the retainer fund I set up. She was complicit, but she was also a victim of his manipulation. I want her to testify, not rot in jail. You're more generous than I would be, O'Malley grunted. I'm not generous, Isabella said, her voice hard as diamond. I just know that Jessica on the stand testifying against him will hurt Harrison more than prison ever could. He needs to see that he didn't own us. She hung up the phone and pulled the SIM card out. She walked to the edge of the porch and threw the tiny chip into the tall grass. She turned back to the house. It was silent. It was empty. It was perfect. But the story wasn't over. Harrison was down, but a man like that didn't stay down without a fight. And somewhere in the dark web of the financial underworld, the people who had lost their money were beginning to ask questions. Questions that couldn't be answered by a lawyer. Isabella went inside and locked the heavy oak door. She walked to the bookshelf in the living room and pulled on a specific copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. The bookcase swung open, revealing a staircase leading down into the dark. She wasn't just hiding. She was preparing for the second act. The Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, in Brooklyn was a stark, brutal contrast to the penthouse suite Harrison Sterling had woken up in just 48 hours prior. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. Harrison sat in the visitation room, wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He hadn't slept. His eyes were bloodshot, darting nervously around the room. He was expecting his public defender. Instead, the man who sat down across from him was a stranger. The man was impeccably dressed in a bespoke navy suit, but he didn't look like a lawyer. He had the hard, calloused hands of a laborer and eyes that were completely devoid of warmth. He placed a single file on the metal table. "Who are you?" Harrison asked, his voice rasping. "Where is Mr. Gorski?" "Mr. Gorski has a flat tire," the man said. His voice was smooth, carrying a faint, unplaceable European accent. "My name is Silas Graves. I represent the private equity partners you were holding funds for, the ones in Sinaloa and Moscow." Harrison went pale. He gripped the edge of the table. "Look, I didn't steal it. It was her Isabella. She took everything. I can explain." Silas raised a hand, silencing him. "We know who took it, Mr. Sterling. The how is irrelevant. The where is what we need. $400 million doesn't just vanish without a trace." "She's a ghost," Harrison whispered. "My lawyer said she wiped everything. The feds can't find her." "The FBI is bound by laws and warrants," Silas said, leaning forward. "My employers are not. We have resources the government does not possess. But we need a starting point. You lived with this woman for 7 years. Think, Harrison. She didn't just pick a random spot on the map. People return to what they know." Harrison shook his head frantically. "She didn't know anything. She was a librarian from Ohio. She liked books. Old books." "Specifics," Silas snapped. Harrison squeezed his eyes shut, trying to navigate the panic fogging his brain. She was obsessed with the Count of Monte Cristo. She read it every year. She used to talk about how the protagonist hid his treasure on an island. Silas didn't blink. An island? No, wait, Harrison stammered. Not just an island. She liked the cold. She hated the heat in the Hamptons. She always wanted to go skiing, but I never took her. She mentioned Vermont, years ago. She said the air there smelled like clean paper. Silas pulled a tablet from his briefcase. He tapped the screen a few times. We ran a trace on the IP address that accessed your Cayman accounts, Silas said. It was routed through servers in Estonia, but there was a microsecond lag that suggested a satellite uplink, Starlink specifically, the kind used in remote rural areas. Silas looked up. Vermont, remote, high-speed satellite internet. He stood up. If we find the money, Mr. Sterling, perhaps my employers will let you live long enough to stand trial. If we don't, well, accidents happen in prison showers every day. Silas turned to leave. Wait, Harrison cried out. The name she had a favorite painting, a watercolor of a bird, a blue heron. She bought it at an auction for $5. It was the only thing she actually owned before we got married. Silas stopped. He didn't turn around. Blue heron, he repeated. As the heavy steel door slammed shut, Harrison slumped in his chair. He had just sold out his wife to a hitman, and for the first time in 2 days, he smiled. 6 hours later, Silas Graves was sitting in the back of a surveillance van parked on a logging road in southern Vermont. The interior of the van was bathed in the blue glow of monitors. A technician named Roach was typing furiously. I've got a hit on the LLC registry, Roach said, chewing on a toothpick. Blue Heron Holdings, registered in Delaware, but the property tax bill goes to a P.O. box in Montpelier, cross-referencing with property deeds purchased in cash in the last 3 years. Roach hit enter. A map appeared on the screen. A red dot pulsed in the middle of a vast green expanse of the Green Mountain National Forest. Gotcha. Roach grinned. Old farmhouse. 40 acres. No neighbors for 3 miles. Owned by Blue Heron Holdings. And guess what? The power usage spiked yesterday. Someone turned on the main boiler. Silas checked his weapon, a suppressed Sig Sauer P226. He slotted it into his shoulder holster. Is the perimeter secure? Silas asked. It's just Woods, boss. Roach shrugged. No cameras on the public road. She's isolated. We can be in and out in 20 minutes. Do we take her alive? We need the encryption keys for the crypto wallets, Silas said coldly. So yes, alive. Hurt if necessary. But alive. What about the bodyguard? If she's sitting on that much cash, she must have muscle. She's a librarian, Silas scoffed. Her only muscle is her brain. Let's move. Isabella was in the kitchen making toast when the proximity alarm on her wristwatch vibrated. It wasn't a loud siren. It was a subtle rhythmic pulse against her wrist bone. 3 pulses. That meant the outer perimeter sensor located half a mile down the driveway had been tripped. She didn't panic. She didn't drop the plate. She calmly set the toast down and walked to the wall-mounted iPad that controlled the smart home system. She tapped the security feed. The screen showed a grainy thermal image of a black SUV moving slowly up the gravel drive, lights off. So soon, she whispered to herself. Harrison must have talked. She had expected the FBI first, but the FBI would have come with sirens and helicopters. This was a silent approach. Professionals. Isabella went to the front door and locked the deadbolt. Then she engaged the panic shutters. With a low hum of hydraulics, heavy steel plates slid down over the windows of the farmhouse, turning the charming rustic home into a bunker. She ran to the study. She opened the safe and pulled out not a gun, but a laptop and a large, oddly shaped remote control. Outside, Silas Graves watched the steel shutters slam down. He signaled for the driver to stop. "She knows we're here," Silas said into his comms. "Plan B, breach the front door. Roach, kill the power." The lights in the farmhouse died instantly as Roach cut the main line from the transformer box down the road. The house was plunged into darkness. Silas and 2 other mercenaries moved tactically through the tall grass, their night vision goggles, casting the world in eerie green phosphor. They reached the front porch. One of the men attached a shaped C4 charge to the lock mechanism of the heavy oak door. Boom! The door splintered inward, smoke billowing. "Go, go, go!" Silas shouted. The team stormed into the hallway, weapons raised. "Federal agents!" One of them shouted a lie to confuse any neighbors who might hear, though there were none. The hallway was empty. Silence hung heavy in the dust-filled air. "Clear left," one mercenary said. "Clear right," said the other. Silas moved cautiously toward the living room. "Miss Sterling," he called out, his voice echoing. "We just want to talk about the Cayman accounts. Make this easy and you won't get hurt." No answer. Suddenly a blinding white light flooded the room. It wasn't the house lights. It was high-intensity strobe lights mounted in the ceiling corners, flashing at a disorienting frequency. The mercenaries yelled, ripping off their night vision goggles as the strobes blinded them. Then came the sound, a high-pitched sonic frequency, the kind used for riot control, blasted from hidden speakers. It was a sound so piercing it felt like a drill boring into their skulls. The 2 mercenaries dropped to their knees, clutching their ears. Their equilibrium shattered. Silas, gritting his teeth against the pain, stumbled forward. He fired 2 shots blindly into the ceiling to kill the lights, but they were encased in bulletproof polycarbonate. "It's a trap!" Silas yelled, but he couldn't even hear his own voice over the sonic scream. He saw a shadow move at the top of the stairs. He raised his gun. Click. The floor beneath him gave way. It wasn't a trapdoor. It was a rug covering a section of the floor where the joists had been deliberately weakened. Silas fell 10 feet into the basement, crashing onto a pile of old mattresses. The fall knocked the wind out of him. The sonic noise stopped abruptly. The strobe lights cut out, leaving him in pitch blackness. Silas groaned, reaching for his radio. "Roach, Roach, come in." Static. "Your signal is jammed," a voice said. It came from a speaker mounted on the basement wall. It was Isabella's voice, calm, controlled. "Hello, Mr. Graves. I assume that's your name, or is it one of your aliases?" Silas fumbled for his flashlight, clicking it on. He was in a concrete cell. The stairs leading up had been retracted, some kind of motorized drawbridge mechanism. "You're making a mistake, Isabella." Silas growled, standing up and aiming his light around the room. "The people I work for, they will burn this whole forest down to get you." "The Omni Group?" Isabella asked. "Yes, I know. I read Harrison's encrypted messages. I know about the arms deals in Sudan and the human trafficking rings in Eastern Europe." Silas paused. "If you know that you know you can't win, give us the keys." "You're trapped in a reinforced wine cellar, Mr. Graves," Isabella said. "The air vents are currently closing. In about 2 hours, the CO2 levels will rise and you will fall asleep. By the time you wake up, the police will be here." "Police?" Silas laughed. You can't call the police. You're a wanted fugitive. Am I? Isabella's voice had a hint of amusement. I just sent a live stream of your break-in to the Vermont State Police. I told them a hit squad sent by my corrupt husband was trying to kill me. I'm the victim here, remember, the frantic, terrified wife fleeing a criminal. Silas cursed. She was playing chess while he was playing checkers. What about the money? Silas demanded. You can't spend it. You can't hide it forever. I told you, she said. I didn't keep it. But I did keep something else. What? The ledger, she said. The master list of every investor in the Omni Group. Names, addresses, bank accounts. I just set a dead man switch. If I don't enter a code in the next 30 minutes, that list gets emailed to Interpol, the CIA, and the New York Times. Silas went cold. That list would destroy the syndicate. It would start a war. What do you want? Silas asked, his voice lower now. A negotiation. I want you to deliver a message to your employers, Isabella said. Tell them the money is gone, donated to the victims of their crimes. Tell them I have the ledger. As long as I am safe, and as long as I am left alone, the ledger stays encrypted. If I see so much as a shadow of one of your men again, I burn the Omni Group to the ground. There was a silence. You're bluffing, Silas said. Try me, she replied. The state troopers are 5 minutes out. I'm leaving now through the back tunnel. You can wait for them or you can climb out the window. Well, I'm about to unlock. Your choice. A heavy metallic clank sounded from the far wall. A small window high up near the ceiling popped open. It was just big enough for a man to squeeze through. Silas didn't hesitate. He holstered his gun and scrambled up the crates to the window. He clawed his way out into the cool night air, gasping. He saw the lights of the police cruisers flashing in the distance, coming up the mountain road. He looked back at the house. It stood silent and dark. Isabella was gone. Again. But as Silas ran into the woods, retreating to his van, he realized something terrifying. Isabella Sterling wasn't just a survivor. She was a predator who had finally shed her sheep's clothing. Harrison Sterling had created a monster, and now that monster held the leash of the most dangerous criminal organization in the world. 6 months later, the cafeteria at the Federal Correctional Institution in Otisville was noisy, a cacophony of shouting voices and clattering trays. Harrison Sterling sat alone at a corner table. He had aged 10 years in 6 months. His hair was thinning, his skin pasty from lack of sunlight. He was no longer the king of Wall Street. Here he was, inmate 89402B, just another white-collar criminal who had flown too close to the sun. He stared at the small television mounted on the wall encased in a protective cage. The inmates usually watched sports, but today a special news report was playing. It has been half a year since the collapse of Titan Corp, the news anchor said, and the fallout continues. This morning, federal prosecutors announced additional indictments against the Omni Group, a global crime syndicate based on anonymous evidence provided by a whistleblower known only as the Librarian. Harrison flinched at the name. Meanwhile, the anchor continued, Jessica Vane, the former PR head for Titan Corp, was sentenced to 2 years of probation today, after cooperating fully with authorities. In a statement outside the courthouse, she thanked an anonymous donor who paid for her legal defense. Harrison gripped his plastic spoon until it bent. She had paid for Jessica's lawyer. She was mocking him. Even from the shadows, Isabella was pulling the strings. The scene on the TV changed to a B-roll of the seized Titan Corp headquarters, now being stripped of its logos. As for the whereabouts of Isabella Sterling, the reporter concluded, she remains at large. Rumors place her in Europe, South America, or even Asia, but no confirmed sightings have been reported. She has become something of a folk hero, the silent wife who took down a corrupt empire. Harrison turned away from the screen. He looked down at his tray of grey meatloaf. He realized with a sinking feeling that would last for the rest of his 20-year sentence that he had never really known his wife at all. He had married a reflection, a quiet surface. He had never bothered to look into the depths, and the depths had swallowed him whole. Thousands of miles away, the wind whipped off the Amalfi coast, carrying the scent of salt and lemons. A woman sat on the terrace of a small, whitewashed villa overlooking the Tyrrhenian Sea. Her hair was cut short and dyed a rich chestnut brown. She wore simple linen clothes and oversized sunglasses. To the locals, she was Miss Rosie, a quiet American writer who kept to herself and tipped generously at the market. Isabella took a sip of limoncello. On the table in front of her was a laptop. The screen displayed a secure chat window. User Silas G. The payments have stopped. The cartel is getting restless. Isabella typed back calmly. User Blue Heron. The payments stopped because they violated the agreement. I saw the movement in Sudan. Shut it down, or the encryption key goes to The Hague. There was a long pause. Then user Silas Chatterjee understood. It's being handled. Please hold the key. Isabella closed the laptop. She smiled a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. She wasn't just hiding anymore. She was keeping the monsters in check. She had taken Harrison's dirty money and his dangerous connections, and she was using them to force the world into a slightly better shape. She stood up and walked to the railing. Below, the azure waves crashed against the rocks. She took a deep breath of the free, salty air. Harrison had wanted to rule the world. Isabella was content simply to fix it one anonymous threat at a time. She raised her glass to the empty horizon. "Checkmate," she whispered. And that is the story of Isabella Sterling. She didn't scream, she didn't fight, and she didn't ask for permission. She simply waited for the perfect moment to turn the tables. In a world of loud egos and flashy billionaires, she proved that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you overlook. Harrison Sterling lost his fortune, his freedom and his pride, all because he underestimated the quiet woman standing right beside him. What do you think? Was Isabella's revenge justified, or did she go too far by taking the law into her own hands? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and betrayal, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. 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 You in the next.
And there's people having lectures. Flower arranging. My mum used to pick flowers every day from the garden, cut flowers, put them in fuck me. Oh, sorry, Jack, can't afford your tennis racket. We've got to spend all the money on a ramp and a motorised wheelchair for this money-grabbing little fucking... Why do you need a motorised one? No arms. That's fair enough. That is fair enough. I can tell some of you feel a bit uncomfortable laughing at little Timmy, who's a little 6-year-old lad. He's got a funny little voice because his chest is all fucked. Got no arms, no legs, just like stumps, right? But let me tell you something about Timmy to make you feel better about yourselves. He's a fucking racist. Yes. Horrible little shit, he is. You little fucking bigot. You disgusting little fucking racist, you racist scum, you filthy little fucking, you fascist, you fucking... You disgust me. Homophobic? Yeah. He's like, they're not like us. Nothing's like you, you disgusting little fucking, you prejudiced little piece of, you ball of hate. You disgusting little fucking racist homophobe. I wish we'd had a scan. You absolute, misogynist. If he could, he'd rape. There's your little Timmy.